This video is sponsored by our friends over at Squarespace. The best of Sony 135mm lenses. Now, in case you're hearing it for the first time, and I am honored that you are hearing this information from me first, Sony just announced the G Master 135 f1.8. And yours truly got to play with it for 90 minutes. So Sony flew us out to New York in the snow to get a little bit of action with the 135 for 90 minutes. But hey, don't worry, we got some amazing sample photos for you guys. So in this video, we're gonna talk about what the 135 does, who's it for, and compare it to a few 135 that already exist out there to see which one is right for you. And no, I'm not selling my Zeiss 135 for it. Though it's tempting. So the 135 focal length is definitely geared towards portrait photographers, wedding filmmakers, sports photographers, filmmakers, and a small percentage of the advanced hobbyists out there. So we'll start off with portrait photographers. The 135 is fantastic for portraits. That long telephoto length will help you isolate your subject, highlight your subject, and really compresses the background, giving a nice blur in the background, the bokeh. Now, 135 supposedly gives off the least amount of distortion, so it's very flattering for the subject and the subject's faces, which I absolutely agree. These photos look fantastic. Good job, Vivian. Good job. And the 135 focal length will be great for wedding photographers as well. Wedding filmmakers, I will loop you guys in just a bit. But I do apologize in advance. These are not the best wedding photos just because of the environment that we were in. It's very more Hollywood studio lit versus the outdoor natural light portrait wedding shots that we're accustomed to, but the models still look fantastic. Wedding photographers will enjoy all the portrait perks that I was talking about earlier. Plus, the new 135 G Master actually has the closest minimum focusing distance out of the other 135 that exists right now. What that means is that you can use the 135 to get close-up detail shots. Now, personally, I would have a dedicated macro lens for that. However, if you don't want to carry too many lenses, just know that the 135 G Master can do double the duty. Now, I have to clarify right now, I am not a sports photographer. As you can tell, my shots right here, they're absolutely garbage. But from what I learned from my sports photography friend, having that 1.8 aperture is very advantageous for indoor sports and for sports that are taking place during the night. In this particular situation with the basketball players, I was literally in the action with them just because of how close and how tight the sets are with everything else. But I would imagine in an actual sports environment, the sideline will be way further away from the basketball players or just players in general. So framing shouldn't be an issue. For better insights of this lens for sports photography, you might want to check out Sony artisan Patrick Murphy-Racy. He'll probably have way better insights for the 135 for sports photography than I would, or maybe wait until that one camera guy pick it up for his high school sports shoots. Moving on to filmmaking, wedding filmmakers, you can go ahead and tune back in now. This lens is gonna make a lot of your shot look very, very cinematic. Again, it's gonna give you great compression. You can use this lens to really fill up the frame with your subject. It's gonna be perfect for close-up shots because again, it has the least amount of distortion. This lens has fantastic and quiet autofocus. And Sony claims, even though this lens is fly-by-wire, you'll still have very, very good manual focus control. I unfortunately did not get to test that out when I was there, but when I get my review unit in hand, I'll test that out for you. This lens, like the other G Master Prime lenses, has the clickless aperture ring for a gradual change in exposure as opposed to hard stops. So that would be very helpful for filmmaking. But what about the 135 for a walk-around lens for a hobbyist? Now, I personally myself love to do street photos with the 85mm. Again, I just like the compression myself. I love compressing my subject with the background. Now, with the 135, it's a little bit harder just because that's like extra 50mm on top of the 85. So you're gonna have to really back up to get the shot. So if you're in a wide open space, maybe you'll be fine. But if you're in tight spaces, stick with a 50 or an 85. In my opinion, those are better walk-around lenses. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at some comparisons. Now, I did a little bit out there. I compared it to the 70-200 f2.8 G Master and the Zeiss Batis 135 f2.8. Unfortunately, I was not able or I didn't have the Sigma 135 1.8 with me at the time, but I tested it out before with the Zeiss 135 f2.8, so I should still be able to give you guys some pretty good insight as to how that compares to the 135 G Master. But if you guys want a direct comparison with the Sigma 135, I'll have to get back to you guys later. So looking at these photos right here, I'm really not seeing a lot of difference between 1.8 versus 2.8. Now, when I did my comparison with the Zeiss Batis 135 against the Sigma 135 1.8, I've noticed the same thing. In a lot of light, the difference is barely noticeable, especially when you go for these types of full body shots. The background blur isn't as obvious until you go for that close-up. When you go in for that close-up, that 1.8 gives you the better buttery corn soup background. But for the most part, if you're shooting at medium waist up or full body, the difference is a little bit hard to tell. But however, the 1.8 does come in very clutch in low light, as you can tell from the ISO reading. With the 2.8 lenses, I'm always around 800, 1000, or 1250 ISO, but with the 1.8 lens, I'm always around 400, 500, 640 at max. But all of these lenses here yield very, very sharp results, especially the eyes. And I'm also not seeing too much difference in the corners. I'm not seeing a lot of chromatic aberrations from any of these lenses, but I will have to test all of these lenses out again in a different environment. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the weight difference. So Sony was able to make the 135 G Master, like they did with the 24 G Master, lighter than their Sigma counterpart. The 135 G Master comes in at about 2.09 pounds or 948 grams. Compared to Sigma's 2.49 pound or 1,130 grams, almost half a pound difference. The Batis is still the lightest of them all, 1.35 pound or 614 grams, and a 7200 being the beast of them all, 3.26 pound or 1,480 grams. Now, it's really gonna boil down to the unique features of these lenses to see if their weight is worth carrying. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the usability and the uniqueness of each lenses. So starting with the 135 G Master, it has an aperture of f1.8 all the way to f22. Now the Sigma, in contrast, has f1.8 all the way up to just f16. I don't know, there are some people out there who shoot f22, okay? Obviously, these two lenses here have the low light advantage, being that they are f1.8 lenses. They are also able to provide slightly blurrier background. Now, the difference with the 135 G Master is that it has two focus buttons. So if you program eye autofocus to the lens's focus button, it'll make easy vertical and horizontal shooting. It has an autofocus manual focus toggle, a D-click aperture ring, and a focus limiter. And the filter thread size for the 135 G Master is 82mm, which is not bad. It's equivalent to the 16-35 and the 24-70 G Master. So if you already have circular polarizer for those or ND filters for those, you can slap that onto the 135 G Master. And apparently for the Sigma as well, because it has the same filter thread size. Now the Sigma also has an autofocus manual focus toggle, but it also has a manual override switch. And when it comes to video autofocus, it's not as quiet as the Sony counterparts. Plus, when it rack focuses in video, it's very choppy, it's not as smooth. I tested it out against the Zeiss Batis 135. This was way smoother. So if you're planning on doing any video autofocus with a 135 lens, I would not consider the Sigma. Moving on to the Zeiss Batis 135, it has an aperture of f2.8 all the way to f22. And what's unique about this lens is that it is the lightest of them all. Plus it has this LED display that's dope as fuck. Anyways, there are no toggles on this lens, so if you want to go into manual focus, you will have to program it to one of your custom buttons on your camera. Now, what's interesting and what's not really known is that the Zeiss Batis 135 have optical image stabilization. So you have a camera body that doesn't have in-body image stabilization. What are you doing? You need to upgrade now. But yeah, just in case if you have a camera that doesn't have in-body image stabilization, this lens got you. And the filter thread for this is 67mm. So if you are within that Batis ecosystem, 4 out of their 5 lenses have 67mm filter thread. So you have circular polarizer or ND filters, they can share that amongst themselves. Moving on to the 7200 G Master, this has an aperture of f2.8 all the way to f22. Now this isn't obviously I mean, this is obviously not a 135 prime lens, but it does have the 135 focal length in between. Now, what's unique about this lens out of the other ones is that this is a zoom lens, so it gives you that versatility. Now, this one also has 2 focus hold buttons. It also has a autofocus manual focus toggle, a focus limiter, optical steady shot toggle, and a mode 1, mode 2 dial. This one also has a collar as well, so when you have this on a tripod or a monopod, the setup will feel a lot more balanced as opposed to using something like the Sigma 135, which might be a little too front heavy. All right, so here's some additional information about the 135 G Master that I didn't get a chance to talk about yet in this video. It is a G Master lens, and Sony touts G Master lenses have the best out of focus background. It is dust and moisture resistant. It does a great job suppressing chromatic aberration as we saw earlier. No onion rings in the bokeh, just crispy French fries in our photos. No significant drop in the corners, high contrast, and for those of you who are wondering, the focus breathing is very minimal. Now, the price for the Sony G Master 135 f1.8 is approximately $1,900 US. The Sigma equivalent of that is about $1,400 US, almost a $500 difference. Now, I'll say this, if you're strictly a portrait photographer and you don't mind the weight, the Sigma has pretty decent autofocus to get any portrait work done. However, if you need the hybrid capabilities and the best autofocus, the Sony G Master is the one to consider. Aside from those choices, if you want the lighter 135, there is the Zeiss Batis for about $1,700 US. And if you want a versatile zoom lens with that 135 range included, there is the Sony 7200 G Master f2.8 for about $2,600 US. So let me know, are you considering any of these lenses? If so, which one? Man, if I can make that 135 work for when I'm traveling, think of all the fire shots I can get. Speaking of travel, for 2019, Vivi and I really want to combine our hybrid shooting with travel. With Squarespace, we're able to rebuild our website with their clean templates. Everything's as simple as click and drag. Definitely check back in the next month to see our progress. However, you can try out Squarespace for yourself right now with a free trial. Whether you're building a portfolio or setting up an online shop, Squarespace is an all-in-one solution for you. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JasonVong to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. You're welcome. Guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.